Baruch Hashem, and Baruch Haba. Welcome to our advanced study here at Congregation Mashiach Yisrael. My name is Scott Siskin, and tonight we're going to be studying chapter 5 of Tanya. And if we're lucky, we can get to chapter 6. Mi yiftach otana b'tefila uvracha. Who would like to open us in After you.
I really want to open prayer today, and I'm going to borrow a very special prayer, a very Kabbalistic prayer from our Siddur, the beloved Tehillat Hashem. And this prayer I stumbled across. I think it may have been the first time I did the Mincha for Shabbat.
This is one of the Arizal's hymns.
This prayer is on page 250 of the Siddur. It opens.
No.
Opens or not quite? It's just before the Mincha for Shabbat. Maybe that explains the one question I had, which is why he's referencing the Shabbat morning meal.
Oh.
But he does reference Kiddush wine too. I don't know.
Shabbos, yeah.
I've never. But this is a beautiful prayer. I'm going to make just a twist on the first line because it is where it's not the time for the Shabbat morning meal. But this is a very beautiful prayer. I was so blessed. I believe it's just a jewel that I stumbled across and found today on the Shabbat.
This is the table hymn at the top, Bob?
The table hymn.
The Arizal has several different ones of these
Okay.
going through.
Okay. You'll have to help me with that. I shall offer praise on this Shabbat and shall herewith invite the Holy Ancient One. May the supernal light shine thereon through the great Kiddush and the good wine that gladdens the soul. May he send to us its resplendence, and we shall behold its glory. May he reveal to us his hidden things which are said in secret. May he disclose to us the reason for the 12 breads which symbolize a letter of his name, both in the combined and the singular form. Maybe we can discuss that a little bit later. May we be united with the Supreme One in whom is the life of all things. May our strength be increased. May our prayer ascend and become a diadem on his head. Field laborers, that is, Torah scholars and Torah teachers, Rabbi, rejoice with speech and voice and speak the words of Torah which are sweet as honey. Before the Master of the worlds you will reveal words in the secrets of the Torah and deliver new insights in it. To adorn the table with precious secrets of the Torah, profound and hidden, which are ordinarily not to be revealed. And these words which will become firmaments. Who will abide therein? None other than the Shekinah, which is allegorically called sun. He will ascend to a more lofty level, and he will take to himself his mate, Israel, from which he was separated during the week. Isn't that beautiful?
Beautiful.
The line that says, none other than, amen, by the way, none other than the Shekinah, which is allegorically called the sun, is spelled small s-u-n. But I believe it would be proper to make midrash on that. They would also refer to Bin Yah, the son of Yah, the son of God, big S-O-N. Amen.
Amen. It's not a bad drush. That aspect of the sun is very complex. God willing, we'll learn more about that in Tanya.
Can you share any little bit about the 12 breads and evidently a 12-letter name of God?
I could. Let's begin the Tanya, though. That's probably better before we rabbit hole ourselves into the wee hours of the morning.
We get going.
Save that thought.
Yes.
Right.
I always make notes of questions I want asked later that he can explain to me.
God is good. So, a little bit of, let's make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us and betroths us with his mitzvot, with his commandment, and he commands us to engage in the study of Torah.
Amen.
So, where we've been and where we're going. We are now in this section called Spiritual Composition of the first few chapters of Tanya. where the Alter Rebbe is going to be teaching us and explaining to us what we're made of, what the world's made of.
Does that start chapter 1? Excuse me.
That starts in chapter 1. Chapter 1 really starts introducing questions and then ends talking about this concept of two souls. Again, remember where we came from. The entire purpose of the book of Tanya is to explain this one very important verse of the Bible. Do we remember what that verse is?
Yes.
This one I
It
ask
is
you to remember
near
all the
to
time.
us.
For it is very near to you. This
Deuteronomy 30.
That's
30:14.
right.
This thing, Torah, mitzvot, serving God, is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, la soto, in order that you should do it. Okay?
That you may do it.
So that you should do it.
You can do it, right?
So it's easy to say, okay, it's in my mouth. Especially last week we talked about garments, right? We said our souls are a combination of intellect and emotion. It expresses itself, the soul, through 10 attributes. Mirroring God's 10 attributes is sphiro. And we know that each level of our soul, the nefesh, ruach, and neshama, that which energizes our action, that which energizes our emotion, and that which energizes our intellect, all have these 10 attributes associated with them. And this is what the soul is made of. However, the soul itself can also enclothe itself in garments, right? The soul has 3 faculties, if you will. The soul is able to think, the soul is able to speak, the soul is able to do. So when we look at Deuteronomy 30:14, and it says, this thing's very near to you in your mouth and your heart that you should do it. In my mouth, okay, I could say what I want, and I could not say something, and I could say something else, right? In my, la soto, to do, right? I can choose to do this, or I could choose to get up and go do something else right now, right? Mm-hmm. In my heart, it doesn't say machshava, b'machshava, right? Not in your thoughts. It says in your heart, right? So the idea to love God with all your heart is something that's actually, says Moses, from God, very near to you. Very near to you, very possible. And the couple verses before that, don't think it's across the sea so that you should have to go and say, who's going to go get it for us? Don't say it's up in heaven, I'm going backwards. But, you know, it says all of this stuff. How is it possible that I could really love God in my heart? Really? And it's very easy, right? That doesn't seem logical to me. And that's why we're studying Tanya. So in an effort to explain this question fully, the Alter Rebbe is going to take 53 chapters. We are now on chapter 5, where we talked about, let's see here. Chapters 1 through 8 are all about the spiritual composition of the soul. So we're at chapter 5 now, and we're going to be talking about where we came from. You are these two souls, right? The souls have 10 attributes of expression. They are 10 attributes that they basically made up of, right? These 10 prisons through which the soul can be identified or described. And then 3 garments, that which the soul can do, right? So that's where we left off last week. Specifically, at the end of chapter 4 last week, we talked about the godly soul, right? We weren't talking about the animal soul. We said the godly soul's garments, thought, speech, and deed, are Torah and mitzvot, right? You do actions of mitzvot, right? You speak actions of mitzvot. What's an example of speaking? You say prayers, right? You pray. When you pray, you should pray out loud, right? Praying in your head does not accomplish what praying out loud does. You speak words of blessing, right? You make a bracha. You speak words like the Shema, right? Shema Yisrael. And then thoughts, understanding the profound concepts of Torah. And we're going to be focusing on that a lot tonight. One thing we wrapped up with last week is we said that these garments are actually of the godly soul. The garments of the godly soul specifically are actually Torah and mitzvot, right? What's unique about Torah and mitzvot that's unique above any other part of creation?
We can do it.
We can do it, right? It relates to us. It's like water. It comes all the way down.
Well, it's our sending back up. So he sends everything down, we send it back up.
We'll talk about the masculine and feminine waters.
Sorry. Okay.
It pre-existed creation.
Pre-existed creation, sure. You guys are so lofty.
He's like down
Give
here.
me
please.
something basic. What's unique about Torah and mitzvot, and why is that such a foundational truth?
Because it brings
thing I'm
God
looking
down
for?
here into the world.
Sure. Okay. Torah and mitzvot bring God down here. How?
Because it's through our hands. It's through everything that
It's
we
through
do.
us, but it has
We
nothing to do
Makes
with
a
us.
home for him.
Connects us to God.
Connects
to
us to
his
God.
mind and heart.
We
His will.
sanctify
Getting
His
closer.
mind and
everything.
will.
What we are and what we do is sanctified by
Torah and mitzvah. It's
Torah
the
and mitzvah.
purpose of everything, right? So what I'm driving at here, and you guys are all right. No one said anything wrong. However, what I'm driving at here is we know that the Torah and God are one, right? The mitzvot and God are one. The Torah is God's wisdom. The mitzvot are His will. So that's how we can draw Him down. That's how we can connect with Him. That's how we can sanctify this world because of all of that. Because the Torah is God and the mitzvot are God, right? The Torah is God's wisdom. The mitzvot is what he wants. It's his will, right? He says, please don't eat spiders. It grosses me out. We say, okay, fine, if I have to. Right? So because the garments of the godly soul are Torah and mitzvot in our actions, mitzvot in our speech, even our thoughts, Torah, then these garments of the godly soul are actually higher and more lofty than the godly soul itself, right? They come from a more infinite place than where our souls actually were crafted from and cleaved out of, okay? And that's such an important concept that the Alter Rebbe is going to dedicate an entire another chapter just to this concept. Because the garments of the godly soul are God himself, which makes, and we used the imagery last week, if you remember, like, you go and you meet the king, right? And the king hugs you, right? And your friend over back at home, he says, the king didn't hug you. It was his garments that were hugging you. You say to your friend, you're an idiot, right? I hugged the king. Who cares what he was wearing? It doesn't matter. Right. So when we engage in Torah and mitzvot, we are hugging God, and God is hugging us. And that's the point of chapter 5. So our introduction here for chapter 5, not 6. There is a special unity with God and the soul that's accomplished through Torah study. This amazing, incredible, undescribable, mystical union, intimacy between the godly soul and God himself that's accomplished through Torah study specifically above all other mitzvot. All other mitzvot are garments only, but the Torah study is not only a garment, but also food for the soul. And that's the topic of chapter 5.
Question?
Sure.
What happens if somebody goes through life, and I don't mean the stereotypical answers, but I mean, what happens to your soul if it's not given food, if Torah is the food?
What happens to anybody when you don't eat?
You die. That's it.
You don't necessarily die right away, right? If I skip a day of eating, I could live.
You get very weak. First.
You get very weak, and you bring disease into your life, right? You don't get enough vitamin C, you can get scurvy, God forbid, right? So you need all these aspects of Torah. And if you're not getting them, there's going to be parts of your life that are decaying. And that's going to be chaos and not good, right?
Gotcha.
Right. So, who would like to begin reading in chapter 5? I can if you like.
Apparently Laura's reading.
You're volunteer.
I was going to volunteer though. That's okay.
But my computer's down right now, so I can't read right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm still trying to get a signal. Yeah, so as soon as the signal comes back, then I'll be able to read.
Okay.
God willing, we'll hit 6 tonight too, so maybe you can start reading then.
Okay. Let us explain further and fully elucidate the expression tefisa, apprehension. In the words of Elijah, no thought can apprehend you. Now,
So just to talk about that, what the Alter Rebbe here is quoting is Patach Eliyahu. Patach Eliyahu is this famous prayer that we have recorded from Elijah the prophet. And it talks about God and God's unity. And it talks about God's sphero, his attributes. And Elijah says amazing words like, no thought can grasp you at all, right? You have understanding, but it's nothing like our understanding, right?
it's like David's psalm in the verses of praise. That
Absolutely.
one psalm, he says the same kind of stuff.
The thought can grasp you at all. All kinds of concepts like this. I highly encourage anybody who hasn't read Patach Eliyahu. Traditionally, we read it every Friday afternoon. But if you haven't read Patach Eliyahu, read it. Fantastic prayer. It's worth a whole study on its own. Really.
Page number?
Oh, it's in your Siddur, page number, like, I want to say, like,
He doesn't know.
140 something. Give me a second here. I'll find it.
I thought you would have just gone.
I was thinking that today. It's like I always think I wish I could write something that's always on Shabbat.
149.
Is to get my color coded in my thing.
149 in our blue sitters.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, when an intellect conceives and comprehends a concept with its intellectual faculties, this intellect grasps the concept and encompasses it. This concept is in turn grasped, enveloped, and enclosed within that intellect which conceived and comprehended it.
So basically what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is there's a dual process going on. If you're going to understand something, and we have this beautiful expression in English that helps us get it, you wrap your head around it, right? The parable I heard was like a building, right? You have a building, and the architect, in his head, he sees every room of that building, he sees the wiring, he sees the plumbing, his entire head is wrapped around that building. How could you say that? The building's 100 stories tall, you know? Obviously it doesn't fit in this guy's head. At the same point, while we're wrapping ourselves in the Torah and understanding a Torah concept, the Torah is wrapping around us, right? Torah is wrapping around us as well and expressing itself. God's expressing himself through us. Okay.
The mind, for its part, is also clothed in the concept at the time it comprehends and grasps it with the intellect. For example, when a person understands and comprehends fully and clearly any halakha in the Mishnah or Gemara, his intellect grasps and encompasses it, and at the same time is clothed in it.
Right. So this
Consequently,
concept
as
of,
the okay, go ahead.
that's okay, I guess.
No, go ahead.
Basically, the idea is here we have a halakha, right? The prophet Elijah says, no thought can grasp God at all, right? However, I fully and clearly, let's say, understand the concept of tzitzit, or the concept of monetary remunerations if someone steals, right? Let's say I get that. I took something I shouldn't have taken. I apologize. I pay it back with interest, and now we're clear, and I go repent to God, right? That I can maybe wrap my head around, but you can't. We just said the Torah and the mitzvot are God, and Elijah says no thought can grasp God at all. So there's a paradox here we need to uncover.
Okay. Consequently, as the particular halakha is the wisdom and the will of God, for it is his will that when, for example, Reuben pleads in a way and Simeon in another, the verdict as between them shall be thus and thus, and even should such a litigation never have occurred, nor would it ever present itself for judgment in connection with such disputes and claims, nevertheless, since it has been the will and wisdom of the Holy One, blessed be he, that in the event of a person pleading this way and the other litigant pleading that way, the verdict shall be such and such. Now therefore, when a person knows and comprehends with his intellect such a verdict in accordance with the law as it is set out in the Mishnah, Gemara, or Pashkin codes, he has thus comprehended, grasped, and encompassed with his intellect the will and wisdom of the Holy One, blessed be he, whom no thought can grasp, nor his will and wisdom except when they are clothed in the laws that have been set out for us. Simultaneously, the intellect is also clothed in them, the divine will and wisdom.
So this wonderful union, which we're about to read, is pretty incredible. I can understand, okay, there's a law. Two men find a talus. The talus is valuable. There's no identifying marks on it. They bring it to the court, and the litigants say, I found it first. I found it first. And the court's decision, God's decision, the halacha, is that that article should be sold and the money split, right? If there's no other information, right? If it has got somebody's name on it, right? You should return it to that person. If it's got, if there was a witness that said, no, Reuben saw it first, right? Then it goes to Reuben. The idea here is, even if that situation never happens, right? Even if it's hypothetical, this is God's will in that situation. And I can understand God's will when it's talking about a talus, right? When it's talking about physical money. At the same point, those situations would never occur had God not created the world, and may never occur because they could be entirely hypothetical situations. For example, there's an opinion that the law of the rebellious son in the Torah was actually never fulfilled, never completed once, because the requirements to actually put a child to death are so incredibly strict in Judaism that it never actually took place. It never happened, right? So that aspect of God's wisdom and will can be expressed only in the comprehension of the person who's studying it, right? And in that way, and this is very similar to how it says, we can't build the temple today, but we can study about the structure of the third temple, and it's like we built it, right? It's kind of like that kind of concept. So we are enclosed in God's mitzvot because I'm a soul, and I have garments that are engaged in thought, speech, and deed. I'm enclosed in Torah and mitzvot. At the same point, God's will and wisdom are enclosed within us as we either act it out, speak it out, or think it out. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It's an amazing union, right? It's like man and woman get together, and they're supposed to become one flesh, right? And they spend the rest of their life arguing whose flesh they become. And the truth is, they become one flesh in the child, right? The DNA of the mother, the DNA of the father is there, present within the child. It's an amazing unity, right? It's an amazing fusion. And that's what we're talking about here in chapter 5.
This is a wonderful union, like which there is none other, and which no parallel anywhere in the material world, whereby complete oneness and unity from every side and angle could be attained. Hence, the special superiority, infinitely great and wonderful, that is in the commandment of knowing the Torah and comprehending it, over all commandments involving action and even those relating to speech, and even the commandment to study the Torah, which is fulfilled through speech.
So the idea here is, there's a mitzvah to study Torah, right? And you can accomplish that mitzvah, and this is kind of a very serious issue today, because there's so many people who read the Bible, and they just read the Bible, right? They don't study it, they read it. And their comprehension is not going to be comparable to somebody who's a scholar who's studying it, knows how to study, has background, etc., etc. So the fact that they're fulfilling their obligation to study Torah by reading it may very well be true. But the Alter Rebbe here is making a very sharp distinction there. Comprehending and understanding Torah is so much infinitely more valuable than that in the cosmic scale. And he'll tell you why.
Don't by reading it, you comprehend it. Like if I read a book, am
Sure.
I not comprehending it?
But
I
how
mean,
much
probably not to the depth of rereading and going over it.
And since God is infinite, we can go as deep as we want.
I see. Okay. For which is fulfilled through speech. For through all the commandments involving speech or action, the Holy One, blessed be He, clothes the soul and envelopes it from head to foot with the divine light. However, with regard to knowledge of the Torah, apart from the fact that the intellect is clothed in divine wisdom, this divine wisdom is also contained in it, to the extent that his intellect comprehends, grasps, and encompasses, as much as it is able to do so, of the knowledge of the Torah, every man according to his intellect, his knowledgeable capacity, and his comprehension in pardes.
So we spoke a few weeks ago about this concept. Every soul is rooted in a different place on high, right? Some souls are rooted in Gevura, some souls are rooted in Chesed, some souls are rooted in Bria, the world of intellect, some souls are rooted in Yetzirah, the world of emotion. So you need to be rooted in a specific place to be able to resonate and really become a vehicle for that aspect of Torah knowledge, right? And that's, of course, related to the Pardes, Peshat, Remez, Drus, Sod, and that relates to the four worlds as well. You're going to have an easier time comprehending something that you're naturally good at, right? Mm-hmm. And that comes through the root of your soul.
What did you just say? Emotional level or... Oh.
Your emotional
Hello?
level. Shalom.
Hello. Shalom, Josie on the phone.
Hi,
Shalom.
Josie.
Good to
Shalom,
have you.
Josie.
Baruch haba. What were you saying?
What you just said about different levels.
Right.
And one of them was emotional, and I want to tap on that. So, like the emotional level, your soul is rooted. That's what it
Soul
is.
is rooted in Yetzirah if you're an emotional, and your soul is rooted in Bria if you're more intellectual, and it goes all the way up and down the line, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, was rooted in Chochmah Abad Silut, right? The aspect of wisdom in the highest world, which is dominated by wisdom. And that's why Moshe is Rabbeinu, right? He's our teacher. And there's other souls that are rooted in Malchus of Asiya, right? Very earthy people who are very good at working the earth. And the fact is, it takes all kinds. We're all one body.
Okay, hold that thought.
Sure.
Okay, where was I? I'm sorry.
You're good.
Since in the case of knowledge of the Torah is clothed in the soul and intellect of a person and is absorbed in them, it is called bread and food of the soul. For just as physical bread nourishes the body as it is absorbed internally in his very inner self, where it is transformed into blood and flesh of his flesh, whereby he lives and exists, so too is it with the knowledge of the Torah. And its comprehension by the soul of the person who studies it, well, with a concentration of his intellect until the Torah is absorbed by his intellect and is united with it, and they become one. This becomes nourishment for the soul and its inner life from the giver of life, the Ein Sof, blessed be He, who is clothed in his wisdom and in his Torah that are absorbed in it, the soul. That's very confusing.
Very
There's
confusing.
a lot of words for words.
Let's talk about it a little bit. I think this can be summed up and explained extremely easily with a simple verse. So we find that Mashiach actually said, from Deuteronomy, I believe, man does not live on bread alone, right? But it's on every word that comes out of the mouth of God. So how does God create? With 10 utterances, right? He says, Yehi Or, let there be light. Yehi Rakia, let there be a firmament. Let us make man in our image, etc., etc. There's a spiritual energy that goes into those words, these holy words, and that spiritual energy is stuff that nourishes our soul, right? Our godly soul survives on Torah. Mashiach said, I have food that you don't know about, right? Now the body has to be needs to be supported by klipat, right? Klipat noga.
Right.
Right. You need actual physical bread and molecules and things like that and proteins to be able to keep your body going. However, the soul doesn't need any of that, right? Remember, the soul is so alien and so foreign to the body that it needs a second soul just to be able to control the body.
We almost seem to be dancing around the question that we put off, the 12 breads.
Oh, yeah.
Nice try, Bob.
Very nice try indeed. Very nice try indeed.
Kudos.
But yeah, this idea that the Torah is food for us, right, needs to be understood. And we kind of said it a little bit earlier when we said, there are certain, and it's part of what it says in Patach Eliyahu, Elijah's famous prayer, is that God gave us all of these symbols, all these images in this world to be able to understand a little bit about what's going on up on high, right? So as Job said, I can look at myself and see God. You have a thought?
Well, I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh,
I had a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Or a couple of things. Where he's making a distinction between someone, and you made a distinction between someone sitting down and merely reading Torah versus someone studying with the intent to comprehend Torah.
And do.
And so, in the Tanya, in this chapter here, he's talking about, it's kind of a variation on being garmented, being clothed in the essence, the value, the strength, the attributes of the Torah you're studying, by desiring to comprehend. But it seems that someone cannot have that become a part of them, inside of them. You can't merely be clothed by it. Right. It has to be something that's in you. So God is not going to clothe someone in that it's not going inside of them. But also, he says something about the intellect, and
the Bible talks about that,
comprehending. It's almost like there's a predisposition that God in each creature has determined the limits to which that individual may reach.
100% true.
In their comprehension,
at least in this life, in this world.
And so that has to do with what you're talking about, the Sephirot and the 10 midot of your soul, and finding your wheelhouse.
Right. Whatever you do.
And so to pursue that for which God has created you, and to pursue.
Right. That's
so
important.
Again, this is one of my very favorite passages. The word apprehend, comprehend, similar, where Paul said that I may apprehend that for which I also am apprehended of Mashiach Yisrael.
That's exactly what we're talking about here.
So
who is
finding
Mashiach
out
but the Torah?
Finding out who you are and what you are in the Lord. What type of creature are you?
Right.
What is your soul made up to do?
Where's your root? Where are you going?
To know and to pursue that. To pursue that. And thus know the part of God that God most created you to know.
And you could know it better than anyone else could.
And fulfill what God most created you to fulfill by knowing what God most wanted you to know.
Right. And only
which has its limits.
Of course. Yeah. We're all finite.
So that's pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome, right?
I've been thinking about that.
It's this amazing union, right? God is fulfilling who he is, and when God wants to be king, he makes subjects, right? His will to be king makes stuff, right? So God is expressing himself through us. At the same point, we are apprehending God and at the same time fulfilling his will.
And the only one of the things, Scott, for me, this has been like a feature in my thoughts in the last decade or so at least. And I sent this to my son-in-law in a conversation we had about a week ago, and I always used to say this: if someone wants to know the truth,
right,
they will know the truth, because without saying it, that person is going to pursue the truth. But you can't pursue truth apart from pursuing the creator of all truth.
Very true. Ignorance is a symptom.
And if someone does not know the truth, if you run into someone who is oblivious to a certain extent, setting aside the fact that their mom and daddy screwed them up and
everyone's got background.
To a certain extent, at some point, their own personal path, their own personal volition in the process of their life comes into play. And the reason for their ignorance is at least partly, if not largely, attributed to their lack of desire to not be ignorant.
Nailed it. Ignorance is a symptom of disinterest, right? And on that point, and everybody should remember this.
Is that why you tell me I'm ignorant every time we talk?
I'm just trying to get the message. God bless you. Very important and beautiful prayer that everyone should know and pray every day. You should ask God that you should want to know him. Right?
Yes.
And because God will,
that's a good prayer.
As someone who cries that out, it's like I think your mother referred to. David said, "These things are too high for me."
Right.
All this stuff, he says, I know it's there. I mean, something in me is going, hey, it's there. Right. But if God does that, like he said in Psalm 119, right? Open thou mine eyes. that I
Otherwise,
may behold wondrous things out of thy law.
that's very Messianic too. That's the whole concept of Galena, you know.
So, God grant us to have our eyes opened.
Amen.
Baruch Hashem.
Remember that? Do you guys know that hymn way back? Remember when they used to do hymns instead of worship music? Open my eyes that I can see. Open my eyes that I can hear. Wave notes of your truth playing on my ear. It's my favorite hymn growing
I
up.
don't remember that
I
one.
don't remember.
So beautiful. That was good. Okay.
But that's funny. One more additional, real quick.
By all means.
You know, it's a real popular nationwide, worldwide in the English-speaking world. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord, has been
Right,
sung a
that's
lot in the
beautiful,
last
yeah.
several years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a great prayer in connection with something that Paul said was his prayer, I believe, for the Ephesians, if I'm not mistaken. But he touches on that in a couple of places. That the eyes of your understanding might be open.
Oh yeah, there's
That you
two big
understand
prayers
the
in
wisdom
Ephesians.
and depth and riches and all of that.
Mhm.
But I think that it's thought of more as a God. I'm praying for you to open the eyes of my heart. I
Right.
want you to do this.
Expecting
And
some
the-
magic download.
The
right?
aspect of how that we as creatures, we discussed this last night during the Parsha a little bit,
Mhm.
that God foresaw and foreintended.
Mhm.
Always intended that there would be a cooperative aspect. There'd be something that's going on between the Creator and the creatures that would bring that light, bring that unity.
Absolutely. Why do you
into
think that the
existence.
first letter of the Torah is
Right.
a large bait too? Right.
Yeah.
It's always about us.
So that I mean, it's that we, being creatures, would desire and want to hunt and search and dig. Proverbs 2, like hidden treasure, like
Sure.
silver and gold.
Sure.
That we would want what's hidden in Him to find it, and you got to go into Him to get it.
At the same point, think Revelation, right, where he's the gentleman, right, gently knocking at the door,
Yeah, so that's the other side. I mean, He
Right.
wants us to have it, but
and he'll gently
Well, that
nudge,
makes
but
the
not.
fact that
difference.
someone even
That's why
in
I
just
did this
to a small degree begins
I'll
to
fix
seek
it
and
next
cry
week.
out for it,
Right.
that person is only approaching the threshold of something that God has constructed
Right.
for their life to go across to find what He has on the other side of that door.
The Kabbalists call that concept fulfillment, right? Fulfillment.
Let me tell
Not
you,
contentment.
I just learned that today is exactly what you're saying is that process is there's 5 stages of desire that man, and we were created this way to go through these, you have to have housing and food and all these things. They're all set up, and lack in your life and all that is all set up to force you to do exactly what you just said. To just seek after Him with your heart until you're like, look, I'm just not stopping until you show me. I know something. I know you're there. I know you're whatever. And I want you. I want you to fill me. I want your heart. I want to understand. I want to know. I want to learn what's there, because you know it's there even though you can't see it or you can't touch it or you can't find it. He has to give you that. But our pursuing Him is what makes Him give it to you. That same thing that you just said. But
The
He
whole
created
concept of desire,
the
right?
whole
You gotta
thing
want it.
to make us. Yeah, crazy.
And again, that's a beautiful prayer. God, you should make me want it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because by myself, I don't want that.
I want 7 layer cake.
I'm another Adam like anybody else, right? And I have my own stuff that I'm interested in.
The Shacharit prayers in the Siddur pretty much cover that prayer. There's a couple places.
Yeah. That's why it's a good idea to pray from the Siddur every day.
Every day.
Do you know the address
Hello?
of the
Yes.
Yes. May I
That
may
verse
I
being
interject a
apprehended?
moment?
Absolutely.
Yes, in Philippians chapter 3.
Talking about prayers, the Lord
Said that I might
He
know
is so
Him.
magnificent. He is so magnificent because he writes every prayer that we can daven that is perfect for every purpose. And
Absolutely.
one prayer that comes to mind is the morning service prayer that goes like this. My God, the soul which thou hast placed within me is pure.
Tahorahi,
Thou hast
yeah.
created it. Thou hast formed it. Thou hast breathed it into me.
Yep.
Thou preservest it within me. Thou wilt take it from me and restore it to me in the hereafter. So long as the soul is within me, I offer thanks before thee, Lord my God, and God, I hate to say the word, G-O-D, of my fathers, Master of all creatures, Lord of all souls, Baruch atah Adonai, O Lord, who restores the souls to the dead.
Amen.
And
Amen.
it goes
Amen.
on and on and on.
Hallelujah.
Very important prayer. Very foundational. And again, there's so much
Thank you,
Kabbalistic
sir.
significance in that prayer itself, talking about the 4 different worlds, right? Ata nafachtabi, ata becharti, right? You created it, you formed it, you breathed it into me, talking about
Right.
Right.
the world of Bria, the world of Yetzira, this world of Asiya, and all of the processes there. We could probably spend a good month just studying that that prayer there.
Well, that was perfect for her to read that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josie.
Baruch Hashem.
Okay, it is also stated.
yeah.
Are we reading?
Any other thoughts? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. It is also stated in Etz Chaim, Portal 44, Chapter 3, that the garments of the soul in Gan Eden are the commandments, while the Torah is the food for the souls which, during the life on earth, had occupied themselves in the study of the Torah for its own sake.
Lishma. So let's hit those 3 concepts really quick.
Shema.
Gan Eden, Garden of Eden on high. So we're talking about specifically the. Let me just see here for a second. So then the Torah and the souls share life without beds. Right. So this, and when it's talking about Garden of Eden here, it's talking about in heaven before the resurrection. Okay, and it says the commandments, the garments are the commandments. So what you look like, right, in heaven before you get resurrected is going to be determined by what mitzvahs you performed while you were down here. That's why we talk about the fire, and generally we don't talk about that kind of a thing here in Chassidus. But when we talk about the fires of Gehenna, right, it's not a physical fire. You don't have a body. It's a fire of shame, right? You don't have these garments that you were expected to prepare when you were here, and everybody else does, right, because they've all been repaired. So you stand up and you're naked in front of everybody, right? This is called shame. That's the fire that you feel in the Gehenna. While the Torah itself is the food for the souls, right? What's happening in the Garden of Eden on high before you get resurrected? It's a big Torah study class.
Study class. Woohoo!
Right? And that's the food for your souls. During life on earth, they had occupied themselves in Torah, right? If you didn't understand a bit of Torah while you were studying it here on earth, it will be explained to you in heaven, right? So if you never read any bit of the Bible, it's going to be a really lame day in heaven. If you read every word of the Bible but didn't understand one word of it, it's going to be a really awesome experience for you in heaven, right? And again, study the Torah lishma. Such an emphasis on this word lishma, for its own sake, right? The study of Torah because it's God's Torah, right? Not because I'm going to get paid if I study Torah. Not because my parents are going to take me to Disney World if I study Torah. Not because if I study Torah, I'm going to get blessings, right? I'm going to get a boat.
You're going to get a nice party. It's going to be
Right,
a
you'll
mitzvah.
get a
You're
party.
going to love it.
Exactly. I'm going to get honor, fame, a position, a title, anything like that is not Torah study lishma, right? It's Talmud Torah not for its own sake. And that doesn't accomplish the same kind of a thing. And we're going to talk more about not for its own sake in upcoming chapters. Thoughts on that?
It is. I think that's beautiful. I think that's terrifying, but I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is similarly written in the Zohar. As for the meaning of for its own sake, it is study with the intent to attach one's soul to God through the comprehension of the Torah, each one according to his intellect as explained in Pri Etz Chaim.
So again, lishma means because it's God's Torah. That's why I study it. Because He asked me to do it. Therefore, I'm doing it. I'm going to do it to the greatest extent for which this vessel He crafted for me is capable.
How do you spell
Because that's
that
my
word?
purpose. Lishma, Lishmah. I believe there's a hay on it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a difference between Shelo Lishma and Lishma?
Lo Lishma, right? That's not for its own sake.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm coming. Hold on.
Thoughts on that?
Okay. What's Pri Etz Chaim? I can't remember.
The Arizal, the great Kabbalist, and all Kabbalah that's studied today is pretty much based on his prism. He only taught for 2 years. He wrote nothing. And his chief student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, he did most of the writing
wrote it.
for his teacher, right? 2 of his more famous books are called Eitz Chaim, the Tree of Life, which talks about the spiritual workings of what's going on in heaven, the lower heaven. And then there's Pri Eitz Chaim, the fruit of the Tree of Life, in which Chaim Vital writes the Arizal's teaching about the spiritual forces that are at work here in this world of Asiya.
Okay. The food of the soul is in the nature of inner light, while the garments are in the nature of encompassing light. Therefore, our rabbis of blessed memory have said the study of the Torah is equivalent to them all, for the commandments are but garments, whereas the Torah is both food as well as garment. For the rational soul in which a person is clothed during learning and concentration.
So before we, just really quick. This is the, I guess, first of many times in the Tanya we're going to talk about this is the most important mitzvah, right? It's Torah study, absolutely. And we just explain why. It's not only a garment for your soul, but it's also food for your soul. Obviously, it's greater than everything else. However, there's about 7 or so mitzvahs in Judaism that are equal to all the other mitzvahs and that they're so valuable, right? Tzedakah, Tefillin, Shabbos, all these different mitzvahs that are circumcision, right? That encompass the entire Torah, right? And the answer behind that really is they are the most important mitzvah. Torah study is the most important mitzvah for its own reason. Tzedakah is the most important mitzvah for a different reason, right? But for that reason, it's absolutely the most important. And we're going to go on and on with that kind of thing.
For the commandments are about garments, whereas the Torah is about food, so garment. The person during his learning concentration. All the more so when a person also articulates by word of mouth, for the breath emitted in speaking the words of the Torah becomes something in the nature of an encompassing light, as it is explained in Piety.
Amen. So, what are some of the things we went over here in chapter 5? We know that the soul has 10 attributes. We know the soul has 3 garments. We know these garments, when engaged in godly stuff, are actually on a more lofty level than the soul itself. And at the same point, God's expressing himself through us, and we are connecting to God and reaching our own fulfillment, right? And it's this amazing, beautiful union where one hand washes the other. I'm clothed in God, God's clothed in me, and the world becomes a better place as a result. Specifically, Torah study regarding comprehension, apprehension. This concept is even deeper along these lines because there are certain things that God can only express himself through our comprehension as far as mitzvot are concerned, because again, certain mitzvot never actually take place because they don't necessarily have to. Another good example of this would be the forgotten sheaf. Remember that? If you're harvesting your field and you go and you take all the sheaves and you throw them into a truck and then you look back as you're ready to go and you see that you left one in the field, the mitzvah is to forget that, leave the sheep that you forgot. So you can't possibly do that mitzvah unless you forgot.
For the poor, the orphan, and the widow.
Right. So let's say you never forgot, then you never got an opportunity to do that mitzvah, right? Somebody's probably going to forget, so that mitzvah is going to get done. But you get the idea that certain mitzvot, certain aspects of what is a mitzvah? It's God's will. Certain aspects of God's will can only be actualized and realized in our comprehension. What's the value of studying Torah? It's infinite, right? Because there are certain aspects of God that can only be revealed by us wrapping our head around it somehow. And that's kind of what we talked about in chapter 5. Do we have thoughts on that? Questions about any words that showed up?
That was good. How long does the encompassing light last?
We should have it last forever. That would be good, right?
I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Per time you study Torah, it becomes as an encompassing light. How long does that last?
As long as you're studying Torah. And while that encompassing light is there while you're studying Torah, they say the angel of death has no power over you, right? David, at the end, he never stopped studying Torah. And as such, the angel of death had to distract him from studying Torah before he could take him. Right? Moshe was constantly engaged in the Torah. The angel of death had no power over Moshe. God himself had to take Moshe. And there are many other examples of this. People who are constantly studying Torah, they have a divine energy that's associated with them that protects them in an incredible way. How much more so should we never stop studying Torah?
Amen.
You think something else is more important? You think it's important that we should go to work and make money? Absolutely, it's important to go to work and make money. The Torah tells us you should do so. However, what's more valuable? That or being encompassed and wrapped up with God and reaching ultimate fulfillment? Right?
So you'd want to study that in Piety.
You could in Piety, or it's brought down here.
In the nature of an encompassing light, as explained in Piety.
We have to read this Piety. Where do we get that?
That's a great question.
We don't have answers for that, or it's on here?
Let's start with Tanya.
Oh, okay, dokie.
Let's start with Tanya.
That's a good sign. Okay, am I still reading? Who's reading?
That's the end of chapter 5. So let's pause the camera here, and that way we can do a separate upload. Any final question on chapter 5 before we pause?
And should we pray?
Yeah,
down
sure.
for
I
the
just
piece?
want to say this. I just want to say this.
Yes.
That thank you for talking about Torah and how valuable it is. And I was just thinking about Torah because it is a protection. It is a light. And I thought about the song that we used to sing, and I don't know if we still sing it that much now, but we said that he wrapped himself in light. And when you are studying Torah, you are actually wrapping yourself in light.
Very true. Very true.
It's true.
we can rank it up even more. And later we're going to talk in Tanya about the very incredible, amazing, otherworldly power of a minyan, right? Having 10 Jewish men together. If we can accomplish something like that, everything we just said about Torah study gets kicked up to the next level, on such a high level that even angels can't enter the room, which is pretty awesome.
Wow.
All right. Go ahead. We'll join us for chapter 6.